It's pretty long, but I'll read from the top. Let's look at the plot of Howl's Moving Castle according to the timeline. You can take screenshots if you want. The neighboring country is a kingdom founded by witches, a magic kingdom. Because the prince is a wizard, they have state-of-the-art magic. Sophie's country competed with them using science, like Marley in Attack on Titans. Howl's uncle tries to finish writing a magic scroll, but dies. This is important. This means that when Sophie travels back in time to Howl's childhood, you see a paperweight here. And the paperweights are shaped like gun batteries and all the other things Howl loves. At first, I thought it was Howl's paperweight, but that doesn't make sense because back at that time, he's only like 10 years old, but it says unfinished draft on the desk. The draft means a manuscript that is set to be published, but that has not been published yet. So that means that this belonged to his deceased uncle. This scene is at the end of part E. This wizard uncle died before he was able to publish his book. It has not been published yet, so it's a draft. Before he could finish the book, he was probably killed by someone from the neighboring country to stop him from publishing magic. If magic was published, this magic kingdom would lose their superiority over the other country. That's when the relationship between the two countries worsens. You've got to understand this point. Otherwise, you won't understand who the enemy is. It's hard to know whose side Howl is on. Is he on Suleiman's side or the neighboring country's side? He's attacking almost everybody. That's because he hates the magic kingdom that killed his uncle, and he also hates Suleiman, who tries to control him. So everybody is the enemy. So first, you must know that Howl's uncle died before he could finish writing his magic scroll. Otherwise, you'd be lost. So Howl doesn't like the magic kingdom. The king of Howl's country, who never appears, saw the neighboring country as a threat and ordered Suleiman to establish the magic academy where Howl studies. Next, the night when the stars fall. The night he makes a contract with the falling star. It's important to remember that Sophie named the star Calcifer. So, when the star falls and they make an agreement to share their hearts, Sophie says, "Howl, Calcifer," so that the two can hear. She says, "I'm Sophie. I'll see you in the future." Calcifer has already made a contract, so Calcifer hears this too. So there's a cut where Calcifer and Howl look at Sophie. So at that point, Sophie is also included in that contract. That's why he was named Calcifer. And it's depicted quite carefully. You wouldn't understand this if you don't look at it in order. Then, Howl runs away from Suleiman. Suleiman is shocked. You'll see this later, but Howl leaves Suleiman because he has made a contract with Calcifer and gained power. That's how he escapes the academy. Of course, Suleiman tries to stop him, but there is a scene that explains why Suleiman is in the wheelchair later on. When you look at the feud between the two later on, you can see that Suleiman was extremely heartbroken. It's easier for you to understand the story when you look at it this way. This Madame Suleiman is also a complex character. When she says to Sophie, "Hal cannot stay that way. He's problematic," she hides her face with her stick as she talks. A villain must always hide her face. When Suleiman does evil things, she always uses her stick to block the sight of human beings. She might be using some magic to affect Sophie, but above all else, she just looks so cruel. Suleiman is in a wheelchair after the first combat with Howl. 50 years before, a female student ran away from Suleiman and became the Witch of the Waste. Suleiman creates page boys and turns a man into a dog. So the country begins to put more effort into science research on magic. Next, Howl seduces a witch. He seduces the Witch of the Waste just for fun and then runs away. He repeats this behavior with many girls. Suleiman attacks a prince and turns him into a scarecrow. I call this the Sarajevo incident because basically this story is about World War I. As the assassination of the Prince of Austria led to war, this war in the story is led by Suleiman herself. I guess the prince in the neighboring country was pretty strong. I guess this was one of her operations to neutralize magic by curse. World War I begins. Suleiman tries to take Howl's magic power away from him. When Howl fights, Miyazaki shows the military power of the two nations. You can actually see the soldiers trench fighting. So you can see the nightmarish battle between the two countries that doesn't seem to end. Howl meets Sophie, guided by the ring. It's hard to recognize it, but this is where Howl and Sophie met for the first time. When Sophie is trying to get away from the soldier, Howl says, "Sorry, have you been waiting long?" And you can see the ring flashing red when he wraps his hand around her shoulder. His ring flashes red or blue only when they are calling to each other. So this is her destiny. Long, long ago, he met a girl who said, "I'm Sophie and I'll come and see you again." But he doesn't realize that he finally meets her. He's just picking up a girl as usual. But the ring knows Miyazaki is trying to alert the viewers. So Howl isn't aware of his own destiny. This is Miyazaki's way of depicting romance, and it's puzzling. A comment just said that it's hard to tell. As you can see in the storyboard, it only says the ring flashes red. I was about to overlook this, but I thought something was wrong. I eventually found out about this rule that the ring only flashes when they are calling to each other. Now, finally we have reached the main story. After the whole story of Howl's moving castle is over, the prince goes back to his own country and Suleiman agrees to surrender. Suleiman says with some dignity, "Oh, what can you do? I'll end this stupid war." She looks calm on the surface, but she's the female version of Muska. Although she looks like a plain old lady, she's Muska inside. So it's the instrument of surrender. Her country is totally burned. In the opening scene, the people are cheering the warship, saying, "Go and win!" But only one warship returns, and it's about to sink. It's just like Japan at the very end of World War II, the summer of 1945. That's why she signed the instrument of surrender. The nation is bankrupt because of the massive reparations. Howl went up in the sky because he could no longer do business in his country. It's just like Germany post-World War I. And after a few decades, Suleiman starts another war, World War II. The last scene where after she says, "What can you do? I'll end this war." You see the airplanes and you also see Howl's castle in the air. You may think that the plane is coming home from the war, but when you look down, it's all green below. It can't be green because the whole country was burnt. It's impossible to have farms there. So that means this scene is 10 or 20 years later. Just like Germany, the country that was severely defeated in World War I, bounces back and invades the surrounding countries. History repeats itself, and in 2005, Suzuki talks about this in an interview published in Saizo magazine. It is the January issue of Saizo. Suzuki is asked by the interviewer, "Isn't it too soon to end the war like that? Don't you think it's too simple?" It's unusual for Suzuki, but he gets really angry and answers the question with a raised voice. He says, "Didn't you see the planes flying in the last cut? That means another war is beginning. Those planes aren't coming back from the war. They are preparing for war." It's very unusual for him. He explains clearly what the scene meant. Suleiman signs the instrument of surrender and the war ends. But it starts again some decades later. It's hard to know because both Howl and Sophie seem like they haven't aged. So we tend to think that this happened right after. Howl is a wizard, so he can change his appearance freely, but Sophie is also a witch. Because Sophie is a witch, she can stay young forever, but in reality, it's after a few decades. When you look at the whole picture, you'll notice that this story is part of an epic. You're looking at this epic story solely from Sophie's point of view. So, it's very experimental in a way. A comment said, "It's hard to tell." Yes, I agree with you. Well, Miyazaki clearly went a bit too far. Honestly, the story lost its balance. They overestimated the viewers. You know, in Spirited Away, many people pointed out the inconsistency. They were more intuitive when they made Spirited Away, but because they didn't like being criticized, the plan was well thought out this time. But they tried not to show it. Although it's all meticulously planned, Miyazaki didn't explain it at all. He was like, "You don't need to explain about World War II to tell a love story set in World War II." He was like, "It's no problem as long as it's cool." But I think he needs to explain a bit more. Why not explain it after all this planning? Last, Sophie and Howl live happily ever after in the flying castle without aging. The black ribbon proves that she has become a witch. The flying castle in the last scene is the opposite of Laputa. Miyazaki once said that you must go back to the land. But 20 years later he says it's okay to live in the sky. It's about freeing oneself from gravity. So, because gravity makes you old, growing old means aging. When you get old, your body gets heavier and you lose magic power. The Witch of the Waste cannot climb the stairs anymore. The gravity and the aging go hand in hand. You become heavier as you age. Why does this castle fly? Because Miyazaki tried to depict an ultimate happy ending where Howl and Sophie live together in the sky, free from aging. And you cannot miss